The screams tore through the Montana afternoon like a knife, sending birds scattering into the cloudless sky. Jack Sullivan reined in his stallion atop the ridge, eyes narrowing as he scanned the valley below. A plume of dust rose from what appeared to be a freshly collapsed homestead cabin. His quarry, Billy Mitchell, wanted for murder and bank robbery, had just vanished into the tree line a half-mile ahead. $500 in bounty money, enough to last Jack 6 months, was disappearing with him. Jack's hand tightened on the reins. The screams came again, weaker this time, followed by the unmistakable wail of an infant. "Damn it all to hell," he muttered, turning his horse toward the disaster. The bounty would have to wait. The war had taught Jack Sullivan many things, none of them gentle. But the Union cavalry captain had survived Shiloh and Gettysburg with one principle intact: never leave the innocent to die when you could do something about it. As he galloped down the slope, Jack assessed the situation with cold precision. The modest wooden structure had completely collapsed, likely due to the recent heavy rains undermining its foundation. The screams had stopped a bad sign. "Anyone alive in there?" Jack called out, dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. A faint cry answered him, not the wail of a grown person, but the unmistakable sound of an infant. Then came a woman's voice, weak but determined. "Help us, please." Jack tossed his hat aside and rushed to the rubble. Through a small gap in the collapsed timbers, he could make out a pale face streaked with dirt and blood. A young woman, no more than 26, was pinned beneath a heavy roof beam, cradling a bundle protectively against her chest. "Ma'am, I'm going to get you out of there," Jack promised, already calculating how to dismantle the tangled mass of wood and debris. "Hold on." "My baby," she whispered. "Please save Emma first." The pleading in her eyes struck Jack like a physical blow. He'd seen that same look in the eyes of dying soldiers, begging him to deliver final messages to their families. "I'll get you both out," he assured her, his voice steady despite the urgency. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Rebecca Mitchell. Everyone calls me Becca," she replied, wincing as she shifted slightly. "I'm Jackson Sullivan, Jack to most." He began moving smaller pieces of debris away from the opening, methodically creating access. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, and soon sweat soaked through his faded blue shirt. He stripped it off, using the fabric to protect his hands as he clawed through the wreckage. Time slowed as he dug. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. His fingers bled from countless splinters, but he barely noticed the pain. All that mattered was reaching the woman and her child before the unstable structure collapsed further. "How you holding up, Becca?" he called periodically. "Still here," she would answer, each time a little weaker. "Emma's sleeping now. I think she's all right." Jack redoubled his efforts, moving a particularly heavy beam that had been blocking his path. The wood groaned ominously as he shifted it, and Becca cried out in alarm. "Don't move! The whole thing will come down!" Jack froze, realizing she was right. The beam he'd been moving was supporting what remained of the roof. If it gave way, both Becca and her baby would be crushed instantly. "I need to think," he muttered, surveying the area. His gaze landed on his horse standing nearby, and an idea formed. Using his lariat, Jack fashioned a crude system of ropes and pulleys, the same technique he'd used to extract wounded men from collapsed trenches during the war. He secured one end to his horse and the other to the main support beam. With careful commands, he urged his horse forward, creating enough tension to hold the beam in place while he worked to free Becca and Emma. The opening was now large enough for him to reach inside. "Becca, I'm going to take Emma first, then come back for you." She nodded weakly, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face as she reluctantly relinquished her hold on her daughter. Jack gently extracted the infant, who began to wail as soon as she was separated from her mother. He quickly placed her in a makeshift nest of his saddlebags before returning to Becca. "Now for you," he said, reaching in to grasp her outstretched hands. She was more thoroughly trapped than he'd initially realized, her lower body pinned beneath a fallen support post. "I can't feel my legs," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Don't you worry about that," Jack assured her. I'll do the moving for both of us." With renewed determination, he dug around her body, creating space to maneuver. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the devastated homestead. Jack knew he needed to free her before nightfall. The temperature would drop quickly, and Becca was already showing signs of shock. As he worked, something small and metallic fell from Becca's pocket onto the dirt, a brass button emblazoned with the letters CSA, Confederate States Army. Jack's hands stilled momentarily. 8 years after Appomattox, the wounds of war still ran deep. He'd lost his wife Emily and infant son to a Confederate raid on their Illinois farm while he was fighting at the front. Becca noticed his hesitation. "My husband's," she explained softly. "I was a nurse, for both sides, when I could." Jack slipped the button into his pocket without comment and continued digging. The past was the past. Right now, all that mattered was keeping this woman and her child alive. Finally, after what seemed an eternity of careful maneuvering, Jack managed to lift the beam trapping Becca's legs. With a swift motion, he pulled her free and gathered her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her slender frame deceptively fragile against his chest. "I've got you," he murmured as she cried out in pain. "You're safe now." The sun had dipped below the horizon by the time Jack had Becca and Emma settled beside a small fire, a safe distance from the ruined cabin. He'd fashioned a crude shelter using his bedroll and saddle blanket, then tended to Becca's injuries as best he could. Her legs were badly bruised, but not broken, a miracle given the weight that had pinned her. "Thank you," she said softly as he offered her water from his canteen. Baby Emma suckled contentedly at her breast, seemingly unharmed by the ordeal. "You saved our lives." Jack averted his eyes respectfully from the intimate moment between mother and child. Any man would have done the same. "No," Becca countered with unexpected firmness. "Most would have ridden on by, or at best gone for help that would have come too late." He couldn't argue with her assessment. The nearest town, Silver Gulch, was a good day's ride away. By the time help arrived, the unstable structure would likely have collapsed entirely. "What will you do now?" he asked, poking at the fire with a stick. "Wait for my husband," Becca replied. "David went to Silver Gulch 3 days ago for supplies. He should have been back yesterday." Jack noticed the slight tremor in her voice when she mentioned her husband. "And if he doesn't return?" "He will," she said, though without conviction. "He has to." In the firelight, Jack noticed faint bruising on Becca's upper arms, the kind made by fingers gripping too tightly, the kind he'd seen on too many frontier wives. "Your husband," Jack began carefully. "What does he do?" Becca hesitated. "He was a soldier. Now he takes whatever work he can find." Jack nodded, choosing not to press further. Instead, he reached into his saddlebag and produced a folded paper. "I'm a bounty hunter these days, Mrs. Mitchell. Currently tracking the Mitchell gang. They've been hitting banks across 3 territories." Becca's face paled visibly. "Mitchell is a common name," she whispered. "Indeed it is." Jack unfolded the paper, revealing a wanted poster with a sketch of a hard-faced man with a distinctive scar across his left cheek. "This is Billy Mitchell, the leader. Any relation to your David?" "No," she answered too quickly. "No relation at all." Jack said nothing as he returned the poster to his bag. Instead, he continued sorting through the items he'd managed to salvage from the cabin ruins. Among them was a small photograph in a tarnished silver frame. He wiped the dirt from its surface and went still. The photograph showed Becca standing beside a seated man, the same man from the wanted poster. Only in this image, he was identified as David Mitchell in flowing script at the bottom of the frame. Jack slipped the photograph into his jacket without a word. Becca was either lying to protect her husband, or she didn't know what kind of man she had married. Either way, Jack had just found his quarry's wife and child. "I'll take you to Silver Gulch tomorrow," he offered, his voice betraying nothing of his discovery. "They've got a decent doctor who can look at your legs properly. Maybe your husband will be there." Becca nodded gratefully, adjusting Emma, who had fallen asleep. "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan." Jack stared into the flames, his mind calculating. "Call me Jack," he said quietly. Looks like we'll be traveling together for a while." That night, Jack slept lightly, one hand on his Colt revolver. The stars wheeled overhead as he considered his next move. $500 in bounty money waited in Silver Gulch, and the key to collecting it was sleeping peacefully just a few feet away. Silver Gulch rose from the prairie like a mirage, a collection of weathered wooden buildings straddling a muddy main street. Jack rode in with Becca seated before him on the saddle, Emma securely wrapped against her chest. Curious eyes tracked their progress from behind curtained windows and saloon doors. The town had grown since Jack last passed through. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad 50 miles south had brought new prosperity to these isolated communities, along with new opportunities for men like David Mitchell and his gang. "Mrs. Hollister runs the boarding house," Jack explained as they approached a tall, narrow building with lace curtains in the windows. "She's a good woman. She'll look after you and Emma while I make some inquiries." Mrs. Hollister, a stout widow with shrewd eyes and silver-streaked hair, appeared in the doorway before they reached it. Her expression shifted from curiosity to concern at the sight of Becca's condition. "Another stray, Sullivan?" she asked, though her tone held no judgment. "Found them in a collapsed cabin 20 miles east," Jack explained as he helped Becca dismount. "Mrs. Mitchell here is looking for her husband, David Mitchell. Came to town a few days back." Something flickered in Mrs. Hollister's eyes, recognition, then caution. "Well, we'll get you settled first, dear. You look ready to drop." Jack found himself relegated to the porch as Mrs. Hollister took charge, bustling Becca and Emma inside with promises of hot food and clean beds. Before the door closed, Becca glanced back at him. "You'll let me know if you find David?" she asked, a strange mixture of hope and dread in her voice. "Count on it," Jack promised. The Golden Eagle Saloon served as Silver Gulch's central gathering place, where information flowed as freely as the watered-down whiskey. Jack pushed through the bat-wing doors, his eyes adjusting to the smoky interior as he scanned the room for familiar faces. "Well, look what the wind blew in," called Fergus, the barrel-chested bartender. "Thought you'd still be chasing the Mitchell gang halfway to Canada by now." Jack approached the bar, nodding to acquaintances as he passed. "Plans changed. I'm looking for David Mitchell. Would have come through town within the last few days." Fergus's bushy eyebrows rose as he set a glass of whiskey before Jack without being asked. "Mitchell? Yeah, he was here all right. Spent 2 days losing every cent he had at the poker tables." "Where is he now?" The bartender exchanged glances with a weathered cowhand seated nearby. "Boot Hill?" The cowhand answered bluntly. "Got himself shot dead after accusing Victor Blackwell of cheating. Turned out Mitchell was the one with cards up his sleeve." Jack took a slow sip of his whiskey, processing this information. "When?" "Night before last," Fergus replied. "Sheriff ruled it self-defense. Blackwell's still in town, staying at the Grand Hotel." "This Blackwell, what's his story?" "Businessman, or so he claims. Showed up about a month back, bought the old Russell property. Keeps to himself mostly, except when he's fleecing folks at the poker table." Jack nodded thoughtfully. The name Blackwell hadn't appeared in any of the reports about the Mitchell gang, but that didn't mean anything. Outlaw gangs shifted membership as often as the wind changed direction. "Thing is," Fergus continued, lowering his voice, "fellow they buried don't match the descriptions I've heard of Billy Mitchell. No scar on his cheek, for one thing." Jack's hand stilled around his glass. "You're saying it wasn't David Mitchell who died?" "I'm saying someone using that name got planted," Fergus shrugged. "Whether it was the real McCoy, that's above my pay grade." Outside the saloon, Jack paused on the boardwalk, considering his next move. If David Mitchell had faked his death, why? And what did Victor Blackwell have to do with it? The answer came sooner than expected. As Jack turned toward the boarding house, a man stepped from the shadows of an alley, tall, lean, with the hard eyes of a predator and the well-manicured appearance of a gentleman. A silver-handled Remington hung low on his hip. "Mr. Sullivan," the man said smoothly, "I understand you've been asking about me." "Mr. Blackwell, I presume?" "Victor Blackwell, at your service." He offered a slight bow. I also understand you've brought Mrs. Mitchell to town. How is the lovely Rebecca?" The casual use of Becca's name set Jack's nerves on edge. "Recovering," he answered curtly. "Sorry about your trouble with her husband." Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. A regrettable incident. The man was clearly disturbed, making wild accusations. When he drew on me, I had no choice. "Of course." Jack kept his voice neutral. "These things happen." "Indeed they do." Blackwell studied Jack with the detached interest of a man sizing up a potential purchase. "I must say, I'm curious why a known bounty hunter would abandon the pursuit of Billy Mitchell to play guardian angel to a woman and child." The mention of Jack's profession and his quarry confirmed his suspicions. Blackwell knew too much. "Just being neighborly," Jack replied. "Speaking of Mitchell, I don't suppose you'd know where I might find the rest of his gang?" Blackwell's laugh was like ice cracking. "If I did, I'd hardly share such valuable information freely, but perhaps we could come to an arrangement. I've been told you're a man who understands the value of pragmatism over principle." "Been told wrong," Jack said flatly. "A pity." Blackwell adjusted his cuffs with deliberate precision. "In that case, give Mrs. Mitchell my condolences. I'm sure she'll be eager to return home once she's recovered." Jack watched Blackwell stroll away, every instinct warning him that the man was far more dangerous than he appeared. The casual reference to Becca's return home suggested Blackwell knew about the collapsed cabin, which couldn't be coincidence. The street was growing busy with the evening crowd when Jack spotted three rough-looking men watching him from across the way. They made no effort to hide their interest, one of them touching the butt of his pistol in a clear message. Jack altered course toward the sheriff's office. If trouble was brewing, he wanted the law on his side, or at least informed. Sheriff Tom Wilson was a graying veteran of frontier justice who had known Jack for years. He listened to Jack's story about the collapsed cabin and the Mitchell connection with professional interest. "Blackwell's been nothing but trouble since he hit town," Wilson admitted, "but he's got money and friends in the territorial capital. I can't touch him without solid proof of wrongdoing." "What about the Mitchell gang?" Wilson snorted. "Haven't seen hide nor hair of them since the mercantile bank job 2 months back. 3 men dead, including my deputy. If you're still hunting them, I'd be obliged for any help." "I'm not so sure they've left," Jack said. "In fact, I think they're planning something big, with Blackwell involved." "Based on what?" "Gut feeling, and the fact that Blackwell seems mighty interested in Becca Mitchell." Wilson leaned back in his chair. "Well, your gut's been right more times than wrong. I'll keep an eye on Blackwell, but watch yourself, Jack. This town's changing. Money's flowing in from the mines and the railroad, and men like Blackwell smell opportunity." Jack returned to the boarding house as darkness fell, his mind churning with half-formed theories. Mrs. Hollister met him at the door with a finger to her lips. "She's sleeping," the older woman whispered. "First real rest she's had in days. I'd wager that baby, though angel straight from heaven, never makes a fuss. Any visitors while I was out?" "Mrs." Hollister's expression darkened. "Blackwell sent flowers. Can you imagine? Man kills her husband, then sends roses the next day. I sent them right back with a message not fit for polite company." Jack smiled despite himself. "Good for you. There's something else." Mrs. Hollister hesitated. "When I was helping her bathe, I saw bruises, old ones. A woman doesn't get marks like that from a loving husband." "I noticed," Jack said grimly. "Whatever you're mixed up in, Sullivan, tread careful. That young woman's been through enough." Jack spent the night in a spare room down the hall from Becca and Emma, his sleep fitful and shallow. The pieces weren't fitting together, and that bothered him more than any direct threat. At dawn, he woke to the sound of urgent knocking. Mrs. Hollister stood outside his door, her face ashen. "They're gone," she said without preamble. "Mrs. Mitchell and the baby. Blackwell's men took them an hour ago." Jack was on his feet instantly. "She went willingly?" "No." Mrs. Hollister's voice hardened. "They had guns. Said they'd burn the place down with all of us inside if she didn't come quiet. Left this for you." She handed Jack a folded note. Inside, in elegant script, was a simple message. "The Mitchell map for the woman and child. Noon at the old Russell property. Come alone or don't bother coming at all. V. B." Jack crumpled the note in his fist. "What the hell is the Mitchell map?" "I don't know," Mrs. Hollister admitted. "But if Blackwell wants it, it can't be good." Jack strapped on his gun belt and checked his Colt, the same weapon that had seen him through the war and a decade of hunting men across the frontier. The action was smooth, the cylinder loaded with 6 rounds of .45 caliber certainty. "If I'm not back by sundown," he told Mrs. Hollister, "tell Sheriff Wilson everything." The morning sun cast long shadows as Jack made his way to the livery stable. He was halfway there when a voice called his name. Turning, he saw Gus Talbot, a grizzled former cavalry sergeant who'd served under Jack during the war. "Heard you were in town," Gus said, falling into step beside him. "Also heard you might need backup." "This isn't your fight, Gus." "Wasn't asking permission, Captain." The old soldier's weathered face broke into a grin. "Besides, been too quiet around here lately." Jack knew better than to argue. Blackwell's holding a woman and child, wants to trade them for something called the Mitchell map. Mitchell, as in the gang? Thought you were hunting them. "It's complicated." Gus chuckled. "With you, it always is." By the time they reached the livery, 2 more men had joined them. Freeman Johnson, a freed slave who worked as the town blacksmith, and young Cooper Davis, who ran the telegraph office but fancied himself a gunslinger on weekends. "Mrs. Hollister sent word," Freeman explained, his massive arms folded across his chest. "Said you were too stubborn to ask for help." Jack looked at the unlikely trio, an aging veteran, a blacksmith, and a telegraph operator barely old enough to shave. Against Blackwell and however many hired guns he had, the odds weren't good. But they were better than facing them alone. "All right," Jack conceded, "but we do this smart, no heroics." As they saddled their horses, Jack outlined what little he knew. The Russell property was an abandoned mining claim, 5 miles outside town, isolated enough for whatever Blackwell had planned. "I still don't understand what this map is," Cooper said as they rode, "or why Blackwell thinks you have it." "He doesn't," Jack replied. "He thinks Becca has it, or knows where it is. I'm just the leverage." The pieces were starting to fit together. The Mitchell gang's last big score had been a payroll shipment headed for the silver mine's $50,000 that had never been recovered. If David Mitchell had hidden that money and created a map. "You think Mitchell's still alive?" Gus said, reading Jack's thoughts as he often had during the war. "Faked his death and left his wife holding the bag." "Looks that way." "Stone cold," Freeman muttered. They approached the Russell property cautiously, using a stand of cottonwoods for cover. The main house stood atop a low rise, its windows dark and uninviting. A barn and several outbuildings completed the scene, all showing signs of neglect. 4 men on the porch, Gus reported, lowering his field glasses. Another 2 by the barn, all armed. Blackwell? No sign yet, probably inside with the woman and child. Jack considered their options. A direct approach would get Becca and Emma killed. Stealth might work, but they'd need a distraction. "Cooper, you circle around to the back of the property. When you hear the first shot, create as much noise as possible from that direction. Freeman, you take the barn. Those 2 gunmen are your responsibility. Gus and I will handle the house." "And the men on the porch?" Freeman asked. Jack checked the position of the Sunday, almost noon. "Leave them to me." As his companions melted into the surrounding brush, Jack straightened in the saddle and urged his horse forward at a walk. He approached the house directly, making no attempt at concealment. The men on the porch tensed, hands dropping to weapons. "That's far enough," called one, a swarthy man with a Mexican accent. "Dismount and state your business." Jack complied, keeping his hands visible. "Victor Blackwell is expecting me. Tell him Jack Sullivan is here about the Mitchell map." The man gestured to one of his companions who disappeared into the house. Moments later, Blackwell himself emerged, impeccably dressed, despite the frontier setting. "Mr. Sullivan," he called, prompt as ever. "Do you have what I requested? First, I want to see Mrs. Mitchell and her daughter." Blackwell smiled thinly. "All in good time. The map first." Jack took a calculated risk. "It's not here. It's hidden. I'll take you to it after I know they're safe." Anger flashed across Blackwell's aristocratic features, quickly masked. A disappointing choice. He nodded to someone inside the house. Two gunmen appeared, dragging Becca between them. She looked disheveled but defiant, her eyes widening at the sight of Jack. Emma was nowhere to be seen. "The child is inside," Blackwell said, answering Jack's unspoken question. "Quite comfortable, I assure you. Now, about that map." "Let them go, and I'll tell you everything I know," Jack countered. Blackwell sighed theatrically. "I had hoped for cooperation." He drew a small derringer from his vest pocket and aimed it casually at Becca's head. "Perhaps this will motivate you." "Where is the map?" What happened next occurred with the suddenness of a summer storm. A shot rang out from the direction of the barn, Freeman making his move. In the same instant, Jack dropped to one knee, drawing his Colt in a motion too fast for the eye to follow. Two shots cracked in rapid succession, and two men on the porch collapsed. Blackwell fired his derringer, but Becca had already twisted free of her captors, throwing herself to the ground. Jack's third bullet caught one of the gunmen in the chest. The fourth missed as Blackwell dove back into the house, dragging Becca with him. All semblance of surprise lost, Jack sprinted for the porch, vaulting the railing as gunfire erupted from every direction. He could hear Gus engaging targets from the side of the house, and Cooper's diversionary fire from the rear. Inside, the house was dim and dusty, furniture draped in sheets like shrouded ghosts. Jack moved from room to room, Colt at the ready. A child's cry guided him to a back bedroom, where he found Emma alone in a makeshift crib, wailing in hunger and fear. "It's all right, little one," he murmured, scooping her up. "Let's find your mama." A gunshot from below was followed by a woman's scream. Jack's blood ran cold. He secured Emma inside his jacket and moved toward the stairs, every sense alert for danger. The main floor had become a battleground. Two of Blackwell's men lay dead near the front door, Gus's handiwork. The old sergeant himself was nowhere to be seen. Jack followed the sounds of struggle to what had once been a dining room. There he found Becca backed against a wall, Blackwell's derringer pressed to her temple. Across from them stood a man Jack had seen only in photographs and wanted posters, David Mitchell, very much alive, his distinctive facial scar visible even in the dim light. "Sullivan," Mitchell spat. "Should have known you'd complicate things." "David?" Becca's voice was barely audible. "They said you were dead." Mitchell's laugh was ugly. "Needed folks to think that. Would have worked too, if your boyfriend here hadn't interfered." "The map, David," Blackwell said impatiently. "Where is it?" "Right where I said, under the floorboards in the cabin." Mitchell's eyes narrowed. "Which this bastard probably destroyed when he rescued my wife." Blackwell's grip on Becca tightened. "If that's true, she's of no further use to me." Jack had heard enough. Emma secure against his chest with one arm, he raised his Colt with the other. "Let her go, Blackwell. It's over." "I think not." Blackwell smiled coldly. "You won't risk the child. Besides, your gun is empty." Jack knew he had fired 4 shots outside. 2 rounds remained in the cylinder enough, if he was fast and accurate. But with Emma in one arm, his usual precision was compromised. "He's right, Sullivan," Mitchell sneered. "Always were too sentimental for your own good. That's why I made sure Emily and your boy were home when my men came calling in '63. The world seemed to stop." "What did you say?" "War is hell, Captain." Mitchell's grin was savage. "Sometimes it follows you home." The revelation hit Jack like a physical blow. For 8 years, he'd believed his family victims of a random Confederate raid. To learn it had been deliberate, orchestrated by the man standing before him. "You're lying," Jack managed. "Ask your wife," Mitchell taunted. Oh wait, you can't. It was the opening Becca had been waiting for. As Mitchell's attention shifted, she drove her elbow backward into Blackwell's stomach. The Derringer fired, the bullet striking the ceiling as Becca twisted free. Jack's Colt roared once, twice. Blackwell fell without a sound, a neat hole between his eyes. Mitchell staggered backward, clutching his chest, disbelief etched on his features. "You can't," he gasped, before collapsing to the floor. Silence fell, broken only by Emma's frightened whimpers. Jack holstered his empty weapon and crossed to Becca, who stood trembling against the wall. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, eyes fixed on her husband's body. "He was going to kill me," she whispered. "He never cared about us at all." "It's over now," Jack said, gently transferring Emma to her arms. "You're both safe." The cleanup took hours. Sheriff Wilson and his deputies cataloged the dead and took statements. Gus had survived with a bullet grazed to his shoulder. Freeman emerged unscathed. Cooper, in his enthusiasm, had managed to shoot himself in the foot, but would recover with nothing more than a limp and a story to impress the ladies. By sunset, Jack sat alone on the boarding house porch, nursing a whiskey and the revelation about his family's death. The sound of a door opening broke his reverie. Becca appeared, Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Mrs. Hollister said I'd find you here," she said softly, settling onto the bench beside him. "I wanted to thank you, again." Jack nodded, unable to find words. The day's events had left him drained in a way that even the war hadn't managed. "I didn't know," Becca continued, "about your family, about any of it." Her voice broke. "I thought I married a man who'd been damaged by the war, who needed help healing. Instead, you married a monster," Jack finished. "Not your fault. War creates monsters sometimes, reveals them other times." They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell over Silver Gulch. Finally, Becca spoke again. "What will you do now?" It was a question Jack had been asking himself. For years, the hunt for his family's killers had driven him. Now, with Mitchell dead, that chapter was closed. "Don't know," he admitted. "Keep moving, I suppose." Becca nodded, disappointment briefly crossing her features. "Of course, you're not the settling type." "Never said that." Jack surprised himself with the response. Just never had a reason to try. 3 days later, Sheriff Wilson approached Jack outside the general store. "Got a proposition for you, Sullivan," he said without preamble. "Town council met last night. They're offering you the deputy's badge. Pays not much, but it's steady." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Why me?" "Because you kept your head when Blackwell and his boys tried to take over. Because we need someone who knows trouble when he sees it." Wilson's weathered face cracked in a rare smile. "And because Mrs. Hollister threatened to stop feeding the council if they didn't ask you." Jack chuckled despite himself. "I'll think about it." "Do that. Oh, and one more thing." Wilson handed over a folded paper. "Telegram came for you this morning, from the Territorial Marshal's office." Jack unfolded the message, scanning its contents with growing interest. The $50,000 stolen by the Mitchell gang had been recovered not from the collapsed cabin, but from a lockbox in Blackwell's hotel room. As the person instrumental in breaking the case, Jack was entitled to the standard reward, 10% of the recovered funds. $5,000, a fortune by frontier standards. Jack found Becca at the schoolhouse on the edge of town. The town council, in recognition of her former profession and education, had offered her the teaching position left vacant when the previous schoolmarm had eloped with a cattle buyer. Emma sat contentedly in a basket beside her mother's desk as Becca organized primers and chalk slates for the coming term. "Looks like you're settling in," Jack observed from the doorway. Becca looked up, her face brightening. "Jack, yes, we're managing. Mrs. Hollister has been a godsend with Emma while I prepare the classroom." Jack entered, surveying the simple space with its rows of benches and pot-bellied stove. "Teaching suits you." "Always has." She brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Did you need something?" "Just came to say goodbye," Jack said, the words feeling strangely heavy. Got some business to attend to in the territorial capital." "Oh." Disappointment clouded her features. "I see. Well, Emma and I wish you safe travels." Jack hesitated, then placed the telegram on her desk. "Before I go, there's something you should know. They found the money, all of it. There's a reward." Becca scanned the message, her eyes widening. $5,000? "Jack, that's wonderful. Thought you might have some ideas about what to do with it." She looked at him quizzically. "Me? But it's your reward." "Been thinking." Jack removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "That Russell property is for sale again. Good water rights, decent grazing land. Might make a fine horse ranch with some work." Understanding dawned slowly on Becca's face. "You're staying?" Thinking about it, Jack met her gaze steadily. "Wilson offered me the deputy's badge. Said the town needs someone who knows trouble." "It does," she agreed softly. "Thing is, a man needs more than just a job to make him stay somewhere." Jack had never been good with words, especially not those that mattered. "He needs a purpose." Becca rose, moving to stand before him. "And have you found one, Jack Sullivan?" "Getting closer every day." He glanced at Emma, now watching them with bright, curious eyes. "I was thinking maybe you and Emma might like to help me fix up that old house. Make it livable again. As friends," he added hastily. "Neighbors?" "Neighbors," Becca repeated, a small smile playing at her lips. "I'd like that." 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. The Sullivan Ranch, as it came to be known, flourished under Jack's careful management. The old Russell house had been rebuilt, expanded, and filled with the comfortable furnishings that transformed a building into a home. Jack still wore the deputy's badge 3 days a week, but his real passion had become the rehabilitation of broken horses and broken men. Word had spread that the Sullivan Ranch welcomed veterans of both sides of the war, offering honest work and a chance to rebuild shattered lives. Gus Talbot had been the first to join him, followed by a steady stream of others, men who had seen too much, done too much, and needed the healing that came with meaningful labor and respect. Becca continued teaching at the Silver Gulch School, now expanded to accommodate the growing town. She and Emma lived in a neat cottage Jack had built at the edge of his property, close enough for daily visits, far enough for propriety's sake. On Emma's 5th birthday, Jack arrived with a special gift, a pony he had personally trained for gentleness and patience. The child's delight as he lifted her onto the saddle for the first time was a memory he would treasure always. "She's a natural," he told Becca, as Emma guided the pony around the corral under Gus's watchful eye. "Fearless, like her mother." Becca smiled, the years of hardship gradually erased by time and safety. "She adores you, you know, talks about you constantly. Uncle Jack this and Uncle Jack that." "Uncle, huh?" Jack's smile turned wistful. "I can live with that." Becca studied him for a moment. "Can you? Just that?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken possibility. For 5 years they had maintained a careful friendship, their mutual respect, and shared experiences, creating a bond deeper than either had expected. "Becca," Jack began, but was interrupted by the pounding of hooves. A rider approached from the direction of town, dust billowing behind him. Cooper Davis, now the official town telegraph operator, reined in his horse with unnecessary drama. "Jack," he called, "urgent wire from the marshal. The Carter gang broke out of Yuma prison. They're headed this way." Jack felt a familiar tension settle between his shoulder blades. "When?" 3 days ago. Marshall thinks they're aiming to link up with sympathizers in Silver Gulch. Cooper's expression was grave. "There's more. Their leader, James Carter, he was Mitchell's second in command. And he's sworn to avenge him." Jack nodded grimly. "Figured this day might come. Get back to town. Tell Wilson I'll be along shortly." As Cooper galloped away, Jack turned to find Becca watching him with understanding in her eyes. "You have to go," she said. It wasn't a question. "Have to," he agreed. "These men, they're dangerous, and they're coming because of me." "Because of us," Becca corrected. "I was there too, remember? I'll gather the children and the women. We can shelter at the church until it's over." Jack took her hand, marveling at its strength and warmth. "This isn't the life I wanted for you, for Emma." "It's better than any life I could have imagined 5 years ago," Becca replied firmly. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The word hung in the air between them. Together. After years of solitude and grief, it still felt foreign on Jack's tongue. Yet as he looked at Becca, at Emma laughing atop her pony, at the ranch he had built with his own hands, he realized it was the only word that mattered. "Together, then," he agreed. "But first, I have business to attend to." The sun hung low on the horizon as Jack rode toward Silver Gulch, his colt heavy on his hip. Behind him, the ranch sprawled peaceful and green, a vision of the life he had never expected to find. Before him lay danger and the ghosts of his past. But for the first time in years, Jack Sullivan rode not just to confront death, but to defend life, the life he had built, the people he had come to love, the future that stretched before him like an uncharted frontier. His hands, once bloodied from digging through a collapsed cabin to save strangers, now carried something far more precious, the possibility of redemption. And that, Jack reflected as Silver Gulch came into view, was worth fighting for.